Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to chat to Julie Williams this morning. And Julie Williams runs consciousness medicine, works with consciousness medicine. And I met her through family constellations and also following her wonderful blog and podcast series, The Healing Codes. I really recommend you go and check those out. And I'll be putting the links to all of Julie's work at the end of this podcast. And remember, you can ask me anything, and I can also ask Julie anything in the form on the podcast. Ask me anything. So, hey, Julie.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to chat. I've been working with Julie for a couple of years, been to Julie's workshops and really enjoy Julie's way of working. It's very similar, and I find a lot of tie-ins with the Chinese medicine and Taoist aspects. I find them really complementary, and I find you personally very intuitive and very able to sense the energy and to work with the energy, which you can really do when you're present in the body. So I find our work overlaps there. How would you describe that description? How would you see it?
Yeah, it's a great combination to, any holistic approach. I think that's where, our work is very beneficial and, comes in together, like Chinese medicine, looking at things holistically, in consciousness medicine, we're not just a physical body, we're an energy body, an emotional body, an ancestral body, and a spiritual body that we need to treat across that body matrix, is what I call it, for deep and lasting change. So, and Chinese medicine in your work is similar as well. There's a physical body, but we also need to deal with the energy of it. And then the emotions are going to come up. And then, so it's a broader perspective, which, I think is the secret to lasting and deep change.
And what we're really talking about, I think today, what really interests me is in that change and that change of life, especially as a woman, but it also is for men. We have menopause and andropause for men. And this changes in life. So we're going to be really discussing how to age well and how to really move through the aging process well. Although I'm very excited I was listening to one of your podcasts yesterday, and you were really talking about that the pelvis is power, this pelvic area. And when we're talking about the menopause, we're talking about changes in that specific area for those organs. So in Chinese medicine, they would relate to the kidney and the bladder and the roots of the body, being the time is winter, the flavor is salty, the color is kind of blue-black, and you might see that if your kidneys are or adrenals are suffering. And so we would eat good salty foods, good miso, and do bone building Qi Gong. And in your consciousness medicine, when you talk about the pelvis is power, how would you relate that to aging well and moving through these changes of life well?
It's very interesting. The pelvis, I work with the 7 main chakras quite a lot, and so that sacral chakra, which is really that power center, right, in our pelvis, that pelvic floor, that, the root, I kind of see it, where we used to have a tail and 2 legs, we have a tripod as our root, right? And so our root chakra connecting, right, which is safety. We need to feel safe in the world to be able to fully connect our root chakra, that then our pelvic or the sacral chakra can sit on top, right? And then they can pulse and work throughout the whole system. So I think, as we age, on the personal growth path or not, right, we come up with life challenges, right, that will allow us to clear these deeper fears so that we can access greater safety, so that we can embody ourselves more fully, right? So this is the path of, I think, linear age, right? Because our consciousness is outside of linear time. This is the beautiful thing about being in this body temple that we're in. The physical body follows linear time and gets older with the tick of the clock, but consciousness follows a whole different rule, quantum set versus Newtonian set, of science. So as our body ages, I think it's very important to call on these consciousness, that's timeless and endless, and as we spend more, years on the planet, we build this presence, our energetic weight. And so rather than seeing the aging process as, oh, my body's failing me, or this is changing and I have these limits, to understand that we have the power within us with that mind-body connection to, reverse aging if we want to, or, not that we need to do it, we should embrace it really, right? But that mind-body connection deepens as we get older as well. And I think that's something that's underutilized, and, something that I like to teach my clients and talk about, that you have the power within you to heal. The placebo effect is a human thing. All humans have the ability to believe something's going to work for them and make it happen within them, right?
Yeah.
So it's harnessing the power of consciousness to be able to, really, because the less baggage we're carrying emotionally or energetic as we age, we should get lighter as we age, not heavier, as some of these patterns can, get a little denser in that.
Absolutely. And that kind of denseness and that heaviness brings us down to that base and that root. And that, like I said, in Chinese medicine, the perception is with the kidneys, and the emotion for the kidneys is fear. And so when we can really release that fear from the kidneys and feel really grounded in our sexual presence and this sexual energy that we have, then the mind is limitless. If we're truly present in the body, then the mind is really limitless. We've lost those fear, those boxes of fear. And I do think, I wrote a book on sexual health. And often when I do in the Qi Gong practice in the morning, when we tap into the sexual organs, there's a resistance. There's a resistance to even kind of holding the lower belly, knowing that we're sexual beings, because this is the power. And I think really that has been suppressed either by witch hunts, religions, the whole of kind of society as well doesn't value this sexual energy, this potency that makes it about somebody else. And it's never about somebody else. So these kind of practices that bring us in, I would call it the lower dantian. You're talking about sacral and root chakras. There's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah.
So what would be your practices that you would really see as really sinking into that tripod and releasing the fear? In Qigong, we have some nice kind of opening the qua Qigong movements. What in your experience are some good practices that people could embody in their lives?
I love the breathwork practice. This comes from, I have a traditional Tantra background. It comes from these tantric energetic practices of breathing down through the front of the body into the pelvis, and then breathing up the back of the spine, right? And making that circularity. Often it's the opposite way for some reason. We're breathing up this way and releasing in this way versus inhaling down into the pelvis, down the front of the body, and exhaling up the back of the spine. When I do that, it's like an instant magnetizing to the earth, right? So that is a really simple practice, focusing on your breath, really breathing down in and releasing and getting that circulation, much like the Qigong, the circulation. You can even get the hands going with that. And then root chakra, things, being in nature, time in nature, and, being willing to face your fears and welcome them in and say, what have you taught me? Thank you for, my fears have kept me safe. My fears have, been able to allow me to be very resilient. What have you learned in your life from these fears so that you can bring forward the resources? I would like to be safe, but not with anxiety, right? And you're able to then let go of what doesn't serve. And my sense is that then becomes a foundation. It drops underneath, right? And raises you up to be able to make changes and be able to embrace greater safety, self-confidence, self-esteem, embodiment, less distractions. So those are a couple of things that work for me and as well as for my clients.
Really embracing the body, embracing that wisdom that we have got this far. I'm 56, so I'm super. My dad died at 40, and at the time I was 17, I remember thinking, geez, 40 though, that was quite old. And now I'm 56, I'm like, oh my God, what a short life, and how much wisdom and experience that we're able to use by letting go of those fears and the fears in the kidneys. And I know in Chinese medicine, the kidney are where we would store our Jing, our ancestral energy. We might understand that in a little bit of a similar way to kind of DNA, our mapping of our ancestors, of what we've learned before, is stored in that lower belly. And I know I came across you through ancestral constellation work. Could you say a little bit more on that and how we could really open the root and the kidneys and release fear with this ancestral Jing work?
Yeah. The family constellation work for the ancestral healing is one of the most powerful therapies I have ever found in my journey, and it changed my life and so profoundly. It's beautiful in that what it allows us to do is to take a look at how, our genetics flow down through the generations, energy, emotional states, all kinds of things flow down through generation to generation through the collective energy, which is our family soul. And we are a part of that. We're a part of our family soul. And so what can happen is if in the past, any traumas, sufferings, guilt, shame, secrets, it's a whole list of them. But the idea is that anybody excluded from the family soul creates a hole in the flow of love through the system, right? And then the later generations go, oh, I'm going to go stand in that place, live that person's suffering to try to re-include them so that the flow of love can flow down through to me. So we're essentially carrying the burden for our ancestors in an effort to try to make our lives better. But also it goes deeper than that. It's a survival instinct. We have to belong to our family in order to survive as a child. So these ancestral entanglements that we get caught up in and living the suffering, I mean, I think you'd agree, right? We can't make anything better for somebody who lived 100 years ago. It's actually physically impossible. But our subconscious and our ancestral body is trying to do this on a daily basis. And so this is often the deeper fears, right? So it's interesting that the ancestral patterns from the Chinese medicine are from the kidney, perspective. I see these ancestral patterns, they anchor into the root and the heart, great combination, right? In that when we can free up and set the burden down we carry for others, we actually bring more healing and love to the system, not carrying the suffering, but letting go of the burden we carry lightens the load for the entire system, right? And allows us to then take our place in the system, to land in full embodiment in our place where our life force energy resides in our family soul. If you think of it like a pegboard, every member of the family has their place. If we're entangled, we're running around standing in somebody else's place. As we let go of the entanglements, we find our place in the system, and we are able to embody ourselves and access our life force energy fully, because we can't get that life force energy if we're not in our place in the family soul, if that makes sense. So when we work through that family constellation work, and I've been doing it for a long time now, almost 20 years, I've developed a movements of the family soul approach, which is 6 main movements worked in a particular way, does this. lets you find your place in the system, acknowledge the ancestors. None of my business to carry that. And there's a few more movements that then work into embracing life fully and accessing your life force energy fully, which is not a doing, it's a being. It's so easy, right? It's almost too easy. Just be in your place, access your life force energy, and then your physical body heals, your emotional body is free, your spiritual body is full, you have ancestral empowerment, and your energy body can be connected into all of that for full health and well-being.
It is very powerful, very powerful. And some of those movements, and like you are really almost feel like they're changing the makeup of your soul. And I found such ability when you say it's linked with the heart, only when we're really truly in our taking care of our own selves at our own core are we able to have complete compassion, because we are not trying to save anybody, not trying to fix anybody else. Our compassion just allows people to be who they are. And I found the work really powerful, that some of the problems I've realized are generational, that I've taken on ways of behaving that no longer serve me. And some of the pain in my life, I feel like I have just replicated some other genetic patterns. And when you see it in this way, then you're able to really release it a lot easier and allow it to go back into the generation that it belonged to. You know,
Yep.
if we look at Ireland now, you know, there's a huge I think the gene pool in here in Ireland has the most celiac, is the most gluten intolerant, you know, and that's now, but it comes from generations of not having wheat, of all this being exported. In some ways we could see it as that, and that has traveled through this ancestral line and is no longer serving us now. So would you say that there's a whole kind of collective as well, a whole country, if you like, a whole ancestral way that works with countries and collective consciousness?
Absolutely. You know, there's our family soul, and then there's the country of origin that we are in. And that also has an energy, you know. It's interesting that you say, you know, just to bring this into the ancestral frame, celiac, right, is an autoimmune condition, right? And so autoimmune, your immune system attacks itself. And there's a movement in the ancestral frame called victim, perpetrator, rescuer, right? There's a triangle in that. Bullying, you know, abuse, anger issues, anxiety, depression, you know, bipolar, all of these things are factors for victim perpetrator and autoimmune. Instead of interacting with the world in a painful way, it's turned internally. And so your system does this victim perpetrator internally, right? So that is, you know, one of the factors of, wow, you know, my attention goes to, wow, the biggest, you know, celiac here. I go, oh, okay, autoimmune, or, you know, and victim perpetrator. What happened in the past? Some of the major imprints, like famine, for example, you know, where if one man fed his family, that might mean that another family starved, and you would have been related to these people, right? So, you know, there's all kinds of other things that happened in those victimizations and perpetrations that as a country becomes internalized to the gut, which is our empowerment center as well. Disempowerment, empowerment, boundaries, will, what we're meant to do in life from the chakra perspective. So it makes sense there's this country, you know, disempowered energy, this victim perpetrator, that every Irish person is trying to take some of that to heal for everybody else, including themselves, is how these ancestral patterns work.
And are there practices that you can do on that bigger level? But I think actually it's probably just best to start with the self. That's always the best place to start. Just with yourself, working out your own entanglements, mother, father, grandfather, grandmother. Yeah, actually, so I take that back. We just start with ourselves.
Well, find that self-empowerment. Like, I think the best practices here, if you know, family constellation work, great. If you want to do it, that's fantastic. fundamentally, what we're doing in any therapy, however, is self-empowerment and self-love practice, right? So to find a place to know that you have a choice over your experiences. Because these ancestral entanglements, we're running them without realizing we're doing it. And I love that you've shared that you can all of a sudden see, oh, hang on a minute. That's the ancestral pattern. I now have a choice to do that or to do something else. And that is the definition of self-empowerment, isn't it? Right?
Mm.
I'm empowered now, and self-love, to break free of the suffering and live your life fully, even if everybody else is still suffering, right? There's a little bit of guilt that comes along with that. There's an act of self-love that says, do you know what? Me, you're exactly right. I am important. It's about me, self-love, self-empowerment. And that is what's going to feed everybody else, right? If we bring more life force energy into our family soul by owning our fullness of our life force energy, everybody in the family soul benefits from that.
Mm.
If we take on the suffering and focus on those things, nobody in the system benefits from that. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll finish with this because I think I've been asking and talking quite a few people recently and asking what their morning practice is. Because what I found is the people who are on a journey of healing and self-discovery, being in the present moment. And so starting your day at being in the present moment seems to be a very important thing across the board, because wherever you point your ship in the morning is generally where your day is going to flow. So what do you do in the morning as your practice? What would be your practice you'd like to share?
Yeah, I love this idea because right now we're at a time where we have to up our spiritual practice game, right? Where I used to do, my spiritual practice, whatever, maybe a little bit here and there. It's not only once a day, it's twice a day. I like my morning practice and my evening practice. The morning practice for me is movement, go for a walk, breathe some air, clear the mind. Even if I have to set a phone timer, if I'm busy-minded, for 30 minutes, and not think about anything until that alarm goes off and see how far I can make it. That's a nice practice. So that morning practice, of movement, getting the body moving, disengaging the mind from the presence, like walking meditations, looking at, the flowers or the trees or the beach or the rocks, that mindfulness, right? For me in the movement. Depends what your essence is. I study Ayurveda as well. So I have some kapha in me, which likes more movement, right? Vata might need more rest. So it depends on your essence. Some people love Vata personalities. The airs love the morning yoga practice, right? Morning sitting meditation, because that helps ground them. Whereas I like the movement, right? And then I do my evening practice, which is more of a deeper meditation or yoga, relaxation, unplug from the day. So those are two of my favorite practices. I like to listen to chakra music as well. That's a nice one. Now we have access to all of these different megahertz vibrations, and you can listen. I like to, it might be a 30-minute listen from root to crown, just the different tones. I find that really clears, leaves everything that doesn't belong to me out there, reclaims what does belong to me in here. And that's an important practice, morning or evening, I think.
Absolutely. I really feel that. I feel that letting go. And just then this life force energy, which is without thought. It almost, for me, it feels kind of like a little 4-year-old. It's a very young. And what we're talking about is being young. So being in that present moment and finding a practice. We're going to put links to all of Julie's work. And also perhaps we might find a link for the chakra music. Is that a possibility? Brilliant.
Absolutely.
And we will put that in there as well.
Okay.
So Julie works one-to-one with ancestral healing, and also you can check her out in the podcast, in the Healing Codes podcast, and all the links you will find below. So next month in Chi Flow with Jo, it's all about keeping your hormones and your DNA and your Jing really healthy. So just like Julie and I were chatting about, Chi Flow with Jo is your daily morning practice. 10 minutes sitting, 30-minute Qi Gong, and then a little bit of chat at the end. It's a great community. I'm really grateful. Thanks, Julie, very much for joining me today. And I'm sure I'll be working with you more in the future. Take
Great.
it
Thanks,
easy,
Steph.
everybody. Lots of Qi.